YouTube. Let's talk a bit about the observer pattern. This one's really popular, and in the context of Unity development, I think it's really nice and refreshing once you have it implemented. Because naturally, things in Unity kind of get coupled pretty easily. But the observer pattern kind of battles against that. Just feels nice when things are working with the observer pattern. But what is it? What is the observer pattern? How is it useful? Well, it really boils down to two separate components. On one hand, you have something that broadcasts a message. This could be the player picking up a coin, it could be an enemy dying, it could be health dropping, it could be any type of event that's in the game that kind of happens that gets sent out into the ether. And then on the other side, you have your observers or listeners, and they're not directly tying themselves to the things that are sending out the broadcast. Instead, they just know, hey, I know something exists like a pickup coin event or a, enemy death event, something like that. They know that exists. They're listening for when that happens. And when it does happen, they're all going to do their own separate thing. And that's kind of the gist of it. Does that sound familiar? Well, it probably does, because in programming, not just game dev in general, these types of things are known as events. And so the thing that sends a broadcast will fire off an event, and the things that are listening to are subscribed to that event, and then how they perform that action is usually by delegates. And if you don't know anything about events or delegates, that's fine. I'll touch on them a little bit here, but you probably want to do a little bit of a deeper dive on your own and really learn what they are. Okay, so take a look at this game I got here. We have our player that can move around. We got 3 coins at the top and a UI text element that is going to be our coin counter. And when we collide with the coin with the player, then the coin deletes itself and tells the coin text to increment. Simple, simple, simple. Let's first take a look at our coin text UI element. This is the script that's on it. We basically get a reference to our Text Mesh Pro component so that we can change the text dynamically. We have a coin count on this, and this could be stored obviously in something like a game manager or some other manager class like that. I have it here for the demo and the example. And then what we're basically doing is we have this one public void increment coin count method down here. And we're incrementing the coin count and then displaying the new coin count. Very simple stuff. On our coin object, I'm going to illustrate an issue we have going on here. Right now, it's just a private void on trigger enter 2D. We check to see if we're colliding with a game object that has a player tag, because then we know it's the player. And if we do, we destroy the coin, and we tell the coin text in here to increment yourself and update the new text. If we had an audio system, you could even tell it to play a sound here as well. Okay, so what's the issue here? What is wrong with our current setup? It works fine, so it's not a huge deal. It's not like it's gonna ruin your project if you took this approach. But why is it not preferred? Well, it doesn't really make sense for this coin component to have a direct reference to our coin text. After all, why should this coin game object even know about a UI element? They're kind of separate things with separate responsibilities, separate focuses, and they are related in that one tracks another one. But should every single coin have a reference to this coin text? No. It shouldn't. This is what's called a dependency. You have a hard reference to another component in this script, and sometimes that's fine. In this case, it's not really necessary. So let's try and improve it. And we're going to do that with the observer pattern. And so instead of having a hard reference here to the coin text component, what we'd like to do is expose some sort of event that the coin text can register to, and then fire its increment every time that event happens. And where would we fire the event? Well, when a coin gets collided with a player. So right here, what we want to do is fire the event instead of doing this stuff. So I'm going to take this setup that I have here and adapt it to the observer pattern in 5 lines of code maybe. It's gonna be really quick. First, let's make our exposed event. And so up at the top of the coin script, I can say public static event. And then in here, normally you would pass in some sort of delegate. That is the type of function or method that can react to that event. In this case, we know in our coin text object, we have this increment coin count that has a void return type and no arguments. And so C# has a built-in delegate for when you don't have a return type called action. And to use action at the top of our script, we need to have using system, and then we can reference an action delegate. And if this is completely lost to you, just take some time to learn about delegates and actions in this case. But all that's really doing is saying we have a method that has a void return type. And so I can call this event something like onCoinCollected. You want to name your events with like on or something like that when something happens. It just kind of makes sense. Okay, and now down here, instead of calling coinText increment coin count, we can just kind of get rid of that. We can get rid of our reference to coinText altogether. So now we don't even know that it exists. And now down here, we want to fire the event like we have commented, but something you should know about events in C#, if you don't actually have any active listeners and you try to invoke the event, well, then it's gonna error out and be a pain. So there's two ways to go around this. The old method would be to say if onCoinCollected, does not equal null, well, then we can say onCoinCollected.invoke. Right, we just want to make sure it's not null before we say do the thing. With new C# syntax, it's actually cleaner. You can just say onCoinCollected ? .invoke. And they're doing the exact same things. This syntax here with the question mark actually converts it to that null check when it compiles. This is just cleaner. It might be confusing the first time you see it, but learn it and it's just easier to read in my opinion. Okay, but regardless, that's it. This is the entire script now. We remove that hard dependence. We now just have this exposed event. We are invoking the event, and that's it. And so how do we actually subscribe to that event and make it increment the coin count? Because I made this a public static event, we can now reference coin.onCoinCollected to access this event. And in Unity, it's good practice to subscribe to your events on enable, and on disable, you want to unsubscribe from the events. So we can simply say void on enable, and now we can say coin.onCoinCollected plus equals, so we're subscribing to the event, the increment coin count method. And this is very important if you've never seen events before. Notice how we're not adding parentheses here, and it will try and complain when you do, because these parentheses mean you're trying to invoke the function, which we don't want to. We just want to make a reference to that function. And so we don't actually want to call increment coin count here. What we want to say is just make a reference to it and say, hey, onCoinCollected event, when you get fired, make sure you point to this increment coin count and then call it. But we don't want to call it here on enable, if that makes sense. Okay, and then for void on disable, we just want to do the same thing. Coin.onCoinCollected, except minus equals increment coin count. And guess what? We're done. That's it. Let's test it out and see if that works. So now we can walk to the coins, and look, our text is still updating. We can go through all of them, and now it works exactly like it did before, except in this case, we don't have any hard references between these two components. We do have a slight reference because we have this exposed event, but we're not actually telling this component to call this function here. We don't really care what cointext is doing. There's no direct contact saying, do this thing, I need to know everything about you. No, it's just like, hey, you have this event, cool, I'm subscribed to it, and now I'm gonna do whatever I want. I'm gonna subscribe any of the things I want, and you don't need to know anything about that. And so that's kind of how the observer pattern works. One thing just says, hey, I'm doing something, or this happened, and then you have a whole bunch of listeners that are saying, okay, that happened, I'm now gonna do stuff. And so I could have an audio manager that has, play coin sound, something like that. And same thing, on enable, on disable in their audio manager script, I could look for the coin.onCoinCollected and then do plus equals play coin sound. If I had an inventory or a currency manager for my player that's actually managing coins, I could increment it there as well and not do the coin count here. I could have, that inventory manager subscribe a increase coin method and do that thing. And then in that case, you now have 3 objects that are listening to this thing, and you don't have to have all these dependencies on your components. So I think that illustrates the point. And so you will see more sophisticated examples of the observer pattern online. But if you're a beginner or you really just need something in the back of your mind to be like, what's the observer pattern again? It kind of just boils down to you have events and delegates being used in a way to decouple your code where one thing does something and fires an event, and then you have all these other possible things listening to that and taking action. And they're not communicating directly with each other. They're just kind of broadcasting a message and saying, I am listening to that message. That's it. And it's really powerful. And I think once you have it set up, like, it just feels clean and nice. Again, like, I think it's probably one of the more gratifying patterns out there to try and implement. So I hope this helped you out. Hopefully you learned a little bit. If you're not and you're confused, please leave a comment down below. I'd love to try and help walk you through it. And if you use this pattern in your game already and you'd like to add to the discussion, maybe give some examples, I would love to hear that as well. I'm sure we would all appreciate it. So thanks for watching, like the video, and I'll observe you subscribe now.